The champagne was cold. My signature was still wet on the divorce papers, and my husband was kissing another woman right in front of me while his family laughed. Not behind my back, not in secret, right there, in the living room of the house I had called home for 4 years, with people I had cooked dinner for, smiled at, tried so hard to love. They were celebrating. I stood there holding the pen that had just ended my marriage, and I looked around that room. His mother, Sandra Cole, raising her glass with that smile she always wore, the one that never reached her eyes. His sister, Brittany, recording everything on her phone like my pain was content. His cousins, his friends, people who had hugged me at Christmas. Every single one of them looked at me like I was nothing, like I had always been nothing. And the worst part? For a second, just 1 second, I almost believed them. My name is Maya Carter, and 3 days ago, I was the most humiliated woman in Chicago. Today, I own everything they have. But let me take you back, because you need to understand who I was before all of this. Not because it's a sad story, trust me, it stops being sad very fast, but because you need to understand what they thought they were destroying. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Regular apartment, secondhand furniture, a mom who worked double shifts and still made our place feel like the warmest home in the world. Her name was Diane. She was the strongest person I've ever known. She died when I was 19. After that, I was alone. My father had left when I was 9. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. Every few months, money would show up in our account. No name, no note, just guilt wrapped in a bank transfer. I learned early that people leave, so I stopped expecting them to stay. I became a preschool teacher in Columbus. Small apartment, secondhand couch, a car that started only when it felt like it. I wasn't miserable, I want to be clear about that. I had my kids at school, I had my books, I had my little life. But I was lonely in a way I had stopped admitting out loud. Then I met Garrett. It was a random Thursday night at a small bookshop event. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I had gone in to get out of the rain. He was standing in the back, slightly too polished for the room, looking at me like I was the most interesting thing he'd seen all week. "Do you actually like her writing, or are you just hiding from the weather?" I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in a long time. He was charming, funny, warm in a way I didn't expect. He told me he was tired of fake people, tired of women who only saw his last name. He said I was real. I believed him. I shouldn't have, but I did. Garrett Cole was Chicago old money. His family had been powerful for 3 generations. Their name was on buildings, on hospital wings, on the guest lists of parties I had never heard of. And somehow he had chosen me, a preschool teacher from Columbus with a cracked phone screen and no savings. 8 months later, he proposed. I said yes, not for the money, not for the name. I said yes because I thought, finally, I had found someone who would stay. I packed up my little apartment. I left my job. I moved into the Cole estate on the North Shore of Chicago, believing I was walking into a new beginning. I had no idea I was walking into the most carefully planned trap of my life. The Cole estate was beautiful. I mean, genuinely breathtakingly beautiful. Stone walls, a circular driveway, rooms so large my entire Columbus apartment could fit inside the living room twice. Staff who moved quietly through the halls like they had been trained to be invisible. I remember standing at the front door on my first day, suitcases beside me, thinking, this is it. This is the life. I had no idea that beautiful things can be the most dangerous. The first person I met was Sandra Cole, Garrett's mother. She came down the staircase slowly, deliberately, like she had rehearsed the entrance, perfectly dressed, pearls, a smile so polished it looked painted on. She looked me up and down once, just once, and in that single look, she communicated everything. You don't belong here. Maya, she said, like my name was slightly inconvenient. We've heard so much about you. She air-kissed my cheek and turned away before I could respond. That was it. That was my welcome. Then came Brittany, Garrett's younger sister, 26, gorgeous, and openly cruel in the way that only people who have never faced consequences can be. She didn't even pretend to smile. "Oh," she said, looking at me, "you're smaller than I expected." I didn't know what that meant. I still don't, but she said it like an insult, and everyone in the room heard it and nobody corrected her. I looked at Garrett. He squeezed my hand. "Just ignore her," he whispered. "She's like that with everyone." She wasn't like that with everyone. I would learn that soon enough. The first few months, I told myself it was just adjustment. New family, new dynamic. I tried everything. I cooked dinners nobody complimented. I asked questions nobody answered. I showed up to family events and sat quietly and smiled until my face hurt. Sandra had rules. Unspoken ones at first, then very spoken. Don't wear that color, it looks cheap. Don't laugh too loud at dinner. Don't bring up your teaching job, it makes the conversation awkward. Don't call me Sandra in front of guests, it sounds too casual. Every rule was a small knife. And Garrett, my husband, the man who had called me real, who had told me I was different, he watched it all happen and said nothing. He would apologize later, privately, softly. "You know how she is. She means well. Just give it time, Maya." Time. He kept offering me time like it was a solution. Then one evening, 6 months in, I said something at dinner. I don't even remember what it was. Some small opinion about something small. Sandra stopped, looked at me, and said very quietly, very calmly, "Nobody asked you, sweetheart." The table went silent. I waited for Garrett to say something, to defend me, to be my husband. He picked up his fork and kept eating. That night, I cried in the bathroom with the shower running so nobody would hear, and I told myself it would get better. It didn't get better. Brittany started posting things, little videos, little stories on her social media, never saying my name, but always clearly about me. A clip of me mispronouncing something at a family dinner, a photo of my old thrift stop coat that I'd brought from Columbus, captioned, "Some people never leave their past behind." Her followers laughed, thousands of them. I was humiliated in front of people I didn't even know. And still, I stayed. Because I loved Garrett, or I loved who I thought he was, and I kept waiting for that man from the bookshop, the warm one, the real one, to come back and choose me. He never did. Because here is the truth I was too hopeful to see. That man had never really existed. Garrett Cole had been looking for someone easy to control, someone with no family to run to, no money to fall back on, no world outside of his, someone who would be grateful enough to stay quiet. He had chosen perfectly. Or so he thought. Because what none of them knew, not Sandra, not Brittany, not Garrett, was that somewhere out there, a clock was ticking, and everything was about to change. I found out I was pregnant on a Wednesday morning. I sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes, holding that test, just staring at it. And for the first time in years, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed. Hope. Real, warm, flooding hope. I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the thing that changes everything. Maybe a baby would soften Sandra. Maybe it would finally wake Garrett up, make him choose me the way I needed to be chosen. Maybe this little life would give me a place in this family that nobody could take away. I was so desperate to believe that. I told Garrett that evening. His face opened up, genuinely, completely. He hugged me. For one moment, he was the man from the bookshop again, warm, present, mine. I should have known that moment wouldn't last. 3 weeks later, Sandra called a family meeting. Everyone gathered in the main living room. I walked in and felt it immediately, that specific silence that means something bad has already been decided, and you're the last to know. Sandra was standing at the center of the room, holding something. A diamond bracelet, vintage, part of a family collection worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. She looked straight at me. "It's missing," she said, "and I think we all know why." The accusation hit me like cold water. I had never touched that bracelet. I had never even been in the room where it was kept. But before I could say a single word, Brittany stepped forward with her phone. Photos. Clear, close, perfectly framed photos showing the bracelet sitting inside my dresser drawer, among my things in my space. The room shifted immediately. I watched their faces change, confusion into certainty, uncertainty into disgust. I looked at Garrett. "Garrett," my voice was shaking, "I didn't touch it. You know me. You know me." He looked at the photos, then he looked at me, and he said nothing. That silence was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. What followed was brutal. Sandra didn't call the police. That would have been cleaner, honestly. Instead, she did something worse. She made it a moment. She spoke slowly, deliberately, in front of everyone, dismantling me piece by piece. My background, my character, my worthiness to carry the Cole name. The stress of it, the fear, the humiliation, the complete and total abandonment by the man who was supposed to protect me, it broke something in my body. That night, I started bleeding. By the time we got to the hospital, it was over. I lost the baby. I lay in that hospital bed and I stared at the ceiling, and I felt nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I had gone somewhere so far past pain that feeling had simply stopped working. Garrett sat in the chair beside me. He didn't hold my hand. He kept checking his phone. We drove home in silence. 2 weeks later, he handed me the divorce papers. He didn't even do it himself. His lawyer called mine, except I didn't have a lawyer, so they just sent the papers to the house. The terms were vicious. No settlement, no assets, a non-disclosure agreement that meant I couldn't speak publicly about anything that had happened inside that house. 24 hours to vacate the property. And then, because apparently destroying me privately wasn't enough, Sandra organized a party, a celebration, right there in the house. The night I signed the papers. Champagne, laughter, music. I stood in the middle of that room and signed my name with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. Garrett was across the room with a woman I had never seen before, his hand on her waist, easy and comfortable, like I was already furniture. Brittany filmed the whole thing. She was smiling. I walked out of that house with one suitcase and $40 in my bank account. I sat in my car in the dark, and I thought, this is it. They won. I have nothing. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, I still don't know what, made me pick up. "Miss Carter." The voice was calm, professional, unhurried. "My name is Richard Lawson. I'm an attorney calling on behalf of your father's estate." I stopped breathing. "Your father," he continued, "passed away 6 weeks ago, and, Miss Carter, he left everything to you." Richard Lawson's office was on the 40th floor of a building in downtown Chicago. I showed up in jeans and a wrinkled jacket, the same clothes I'd slept in, because I had nowhere to go and no reason to pretend otherwise. The receptionist looked at me the way people had been looking at me my whole life, like I didn't quite fit the room. I was used to it. What I was not used to was what happened next. Richard Lawson was a quiet man in his 60s, silver hair, steady hands, the kind of lawyer who has seen everything and is surprised by nothing. He sat across from me, opened a folder, and began to speak. My father's name was Daniel James Carter. He had left when I was 9, I knew that part. What I did not know was why. He hadn't left because he didn't love us. He had left because he was broke, ashamed, and drowning in debt, and he believed with the particular stubbornness of a broken man that disappearing was kinder than staying and failing us slowly. He had told himself he would come back when he had something to offer. So, he built something. Over 20 years, quietly and completely out of the public eye, my father had built a technology infrastructure company that now operated across 11 countries. Data systems, logistics software, government contracts, the kind of company you never hear about because it exists 3 layers below the things you actually see. but without it, half the systems you use every day would stop working. He had never remarried, he had never had other children, and 18 months before he died, he had hired Richard Lawson to find me. He had watched from a distance as I married Garrett Cole. He had known about the family, he had known what was happening inside that house, and he had made sure that if they ever destroyed me, I would have something left. Richard slid a document across the desk. I looked at the number at the bottom. I read it 3 times. $62 billion. I sat very still for a long moment. Then I said very quietly, "Is this real?" Richard looked at me without blinking. "Miss Carter," he said, "it is very real." I want to be honest about what happened next, because it wasn't what you might expect. I didn't feel powerful, not immediately. I went back to my car and I sat there for a long time and I cried. Not happy tears, just everything coming out at once. The baby, the bracelet, the party, Garrett's face when he handed me those papers, Sandra's voice, Brittany's camera, 4 years of being made to feel like nothing. I cried until there was nothing left. And then something shifted. It was quiet at first, just a small, cold, clear thought that rose up through all the grief. They think they finished me. They have no idea what they just started. I spent the next 6 weeks learning. Richard connected me with a team, financial advisors, legal strategists, people who had spent their careers understanding exactly how empires like the Cole family operated. I absorbed everything. I asked questions until midnight. I read documents I had never imagined needing to understand. And what I found buried inside all of it was extraordinary. The Cole family was in serious trouble. Behind the estate and the parties and the pearls and the champagne, behind all of it was a mountain of debt. Bad investments, a failed expansion into overseas markets, loans taken out against properties that were already leveraged. They had been managing the appearance of wealth while the actual foundation crumbled quietly underneath. They weren't powerful. They were panicking. And nobody knew, because the one thing the Coles had always been genuinely good at was looking like they had everything under control. My team moved carefully. We began purchasing their debt through shell companies, quietly, legally, untraceable. Every struggling asset they held, we positioned to acquire. Every loan that came due, we were there in the background, waiting. We didn't rush. We didn't make noise. We just waited until we held enough. The meeting was Brittany's idea, actually, which I found deeply satisfying. She had posted something on social media, a vague, triumphant caption about the family's exciting new investment partnership that was going to solve everything. Apparently, some anonymous investor had reached out, offering a financial lifeline, a significant one. The condition was simple. The entire family needed to be present for the initial meeting. They agreed immediately. Of course they did. They were desperate. I chose a conference room in a building I now owned on Michigan Avenue. I wore a black dress. Simple. No jewelry. I didn't need it. I stood outside the door for exactly 30 seconds. Not from nerves. I was done being nervous around these people. I just wanted one more moment of being the only person in the world who knew what was about to happen. Then I walked in. The room went silent so fast it was almost funny. Sandra's champagne glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Brittany's face did something complicated and then went very still. Garrett, my ex-husband, the man who had watched me fall apart and checked his phone, went pale. I sat down at the head of the table. I opened the folder in front of me. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was calm, completely, genuinely calm. I laid out everything, quietly, clearly, every debt, every acquisition, every asset we now controlled. 64% of everything the Cole family had left belonged to me. Then I nodded to my attorney, and the second folder came out. Evidence. All of it. Security footage from the night the bracelet was planted. Brittany's hand, clear as daylight, placing it in my drawer. Financial records showing the Cole family had known about their debt crisis for 2 years while continuing to perform wealth. Documented accounts of the abuse, the isolation, the non-disclosure agreement used to silence a woman they had systematically broken. Everything. Garrett looked at the footage and then looked at me. "Maya," he started. "Don't," I said. Just that one word. He stopped. Sandra tried, because Sandra always tried. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin and began to speak in that calm, controlled voice she used when she wanted to remind you who she was. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this family will not be—" "Sandra," I looked at her directly. "It's already done." The arrests came the following week. Brittany for evidence tampering, 2 family attorneys for fraud. The financial misconduct charges took longer, but they came. The estate was liquidated. The Cole name, 3 generations of it, became something people said quietly in the past tense, like a warning. But here is the part of this story that matters most to me, because revenge was never actually the point. With the first major portion of what I inherited, I set up a foundation. It funds emergency housing for women leaving dangerous marriages, women who, like me, had nowhere to go and no money to fall back on. It provides legal support for people who can't afford it. It funds therapy, job placement, second chances. We've helped over 400 families in the first year alone. I moved out of Chicago. I bought a small house near Columbus, not a mansion, just a real house, with a garden I'm slowly learning to keep alive. I think about my father sometimes, about the 20 years he spent building something in silence, convinced that love had to look like provision rather than presence. I think about all the time we lost. I'm still working through that. And I think about the woman who stood in that room, holding a pen, shaking, while people laughed at her. I want to say something to her, to that version of me. They were never laughing because you were weak. They were laughing because they knew even then that they couldn't actually break you. And they were right. My name is Maya Carter. I walked out of that house with $40 and 1 suitcase, and I came back owning everything.